Alright, Brush Monkeys, we're back, and this week we're talking about ways to remove paint from your miniatures. And I know that seems kind of strange for a channel that talks about painting miniatures to talk about how to take paint off of them, but it is sometimes a necessary step. Maybe you bought some miniatures on eBay, maybe you got some from some guy on Craigslist or the local Facebook miniature painting page, what have you, and the paint job is less than Golden Demon award winning, and or maybe you just want to take off their paint job and put your own on, you know, whatever it happens to be. There are several different ways to do this, and to get into this, we're going to talk about my own journey in miniature painting. I was born in Topeka, Kansas in 1971, and I got started painting miniatures when I was 9, so about 1980. And so this may freak some of you out who are watching this video now, but there was a time when there was no YouTube videos to show how to do things. There was no internet that I could look things up on. There really wasn't a thriving message board community that you could talk to other people and say, hey, how do I do this? Or, you know, what do you think of this miniature? And does this look like crap? And how do I make it better? There was a time before the internet. I know that's going to freak a lot of you out. Take a few deep breaths. Breathe into a paper bag if you have to. I know, it was a dark age before technology. But part of that dark age of technology was I did not know. When I first came across miniatures in a store called Comics and Fantasies in Topeka, I saw these little figures, and they were like wizards and halflings and all these things from Lord of the Rings. And at the time, Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit were like my two favorite books. And so this seemed right up my alley. I was like, oh, there's these things that there's these little figures I can buy that are characters from the books. And then I found out you were supposed to paint them. And I didn't know how to paint them. I didn't know what brushes to use. I didn't know what kind of paints to use. So I went with what was available, which was Testors paints. For those of you that aren't aware, Testors is a model company that makes enamel paints for like model airplanes and model cars and things like that. And their brushes are huge. They're not. These are some modern Testors brushes, and they've gotten quite a bit better about having little small ends on them. They used to be these big honking brushes that were just hideous, and I had to like trim them down to get them the right size. But again, I was painting with enamel paints, which is not fantastic, and the result ended up looking something like this. And I'm sorry if this scares you when I zoom in close, but yeah, look at that guy. Holy shit. Oh my god, look at that. Enamel paint, no washes, a little bit of dry brushing on the face there to try to bring the beard out and make him a little gray, but dear god, I don't even know what that is on the end of his staff. I think it may be skulls. That blue shit all over his face is how I painted eyes back then. It's one of the big reasons I don't paint eyes now. And they've got this crud on the bottom of their base that comes from, this is actually modeling clay. It's what I used to keep them on the shelf, kept them from falling over. You just stick them on the shelf. So yeah, this has been sitting in a box for 40 years and is pretty horrific. This little monster is one of the original Grenadier, and I'll actually show you the bottom of the stamp if you can read that through the clay. Grenadier 1984. This was the original Beholder. So the WizKids model that you see nowadays that everybody's all gaga over, this is what he started out as. Oh Lord, that is something. I'm kind of embarrassed to be sharing these, but this right here is why you need to know how to strip paint. And even when I was able to get a hold of acrylics and water-based paints, some of my earlier experiments in that didn't go so well. This is apparently a Dungeons & Dragons rust monster. This was, again, I think it was Grenadier. Part of a box of monsters called Dungeon Dwellers. This was the rust monster. And I've got, I don't even remember what this little bug-looking guy was called. but he's hideous. And then I had a roper, which he's probably the least objectionable of the bunch, but again, didn't know anything about shade washes, didn't know anything about, hardly knew anything about dry brushing, didn't know anything about, matte sealing them or gloss coating them, varnishes, didn't know anything about that. As is obvious by the fact that most of his paint is rubbed off. So yeah, early examples are a complete dumpster fire. But there's a way to get rid of those. There's actually several ways to get rid of those, and I've lined them up here. This is not by any means a comprehensive list of materials to use, okay? And which you use will be determined mostly by what kind of paint you have. For example, the Artist White Spirit here. This is great for getting rid of oil paints. It can be used for really stubborn enamel, but it's a little bit pricey to use on enamel all the time. Isopropyl alcohol is another good example of a paint stripper. I usually use 90 for stripping paint, but 70 is what I have on hand right now. If you want to get rid of super glue, like you've got pieces that are glued together, maybe a guy's riding a horse or a dragon or something, you need to get rid of it. Get yourself some of this. It's acetone. It's 100% pure acetone. It's just nail polish remover. You can find this in the makeup aisles. These all have their uses. The two things I lean on the most for my paint stripping, and I will get these out of the way, is right here. Pine Sol and Simple Green. Simple Green is great when you need to soak a piece for a really long time. I've used the really stubborn stuff. I've gotten off with Simple Green and the ultrasonic cleaner, which I don't have on this workbench. It's on another workbench. Didn't want to move it over because it's full of stuff and it's running right now. But putting Simple Green in the sonic cleaner is great for stripping plastic miniatures. It won't eat the plastic. This stuff's concentrated, so you want to water it down just a little bit. But big jug like this is only like 10 bucks. The Pine Sol here, again, giant ass jug like this was only, I think, 3 or 4 bucks. It was really, really cheap at Lowe's. So I got a big bundle of this. This is my workhorse. This is what I use for most of it. And really, you could just pour your miniatures put your miniatures in a glass jar. I got this little jar here at a, see it's a tea jar. I got it at a secondhand store, Goodwill store. And really all you do, you just put your miniatures in there. If they're single piece miniatures like this, you don't have to be terrible. This guy is going to come apart because that tail is glued on, but that's okay. I kind of will deal with that when we go back to painting him. There's another wizard I painted. Isn't that terrible? Holy monkey. So I like to put them in there so that there's just one layer on there and they're not really up on top of each other. It gives you a little room to move around. And then, see if I can do this without messing up the camera too bad. This stuff is really strong, so I'd recommend using this in a ventilated area. But you just pour in enough to cover the miniatures, like that. And close up your jar so you don't gas yourself out of here. If you can find one of those old jars with a rubber lip around the side that seals it up nice and tight, that's great. That'll be even better. Kind of give it a little swish. And that's it. You just put that on your shelf, workbench or whatever, let that sit for a couple of weeks, and then we'll come back and scrub it off with a toothbrush. Just use an old toothbrush like this. Most of that will come off, but some of it won't, and we'll get into that when we see how this works. Okay? So for right now, I'm going to go ahead and shut this off. We're going to wait a couple of weeks and come back to this, and then I'll show you how to clean them up. Alright? See you then. Alright, brush monkeys, we're back, and I have had these minis in the pine oil for about a week now, And if you swirl it around, you can kind of see where they're starting to get a little fuzzy and the paint's flaking off of them, especially on that guy. You see little flakes of crap floating around in there. So I think they're just about ready to move on to the next step. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this. We're going to set up over by the industrial sink in my basement and pour this stuff out and rinse them off and scrub them off. And we're going to need an old toothbrush for this. I will show you that when we get there. So I'm going to go ahead and pause, and then we'll go scrub off the figures, and I'll show you what they look like after they've been sitting there for a while. Alright, see you soon. Alright, brush monkeys, we're back, and like I said, we're going to pour out the pine oil in here. I've got an old toothbrush. You can see it kind of old and ratty. And you'll notice I'm wearing a neoprene glove for this. That's because this process gets a little nasty sometimes. The pine oil can be caustic to your skin. It's not really meant to be poured directly on your hands. Alright, so we'll pour that out. Making a mess already. And just kind of run these guys under the tap for a second. And then one at a time. Okay. Here's what the old beholder looks like fresh out the jar, okay? We're just going to scrub them under the... Now, some of these... Let me turn it down a little bit. Some of these, I'm not expecting these to actually come all that clean because they were painted with enamels. Pine oil works on some enamels and does not work so well on others. So it may or may not work on some of these guys. I know blacks and oranges tend to be really, really stubborn enamels. The gray seems to be coming off pretty easily. The red, not so much. And I realized as I started this guy that this is going to be a really bad example to use because the beholder is kind of gray anyway. He was painted with gray paints and then scrub him off and he's still kind of gray. So, alright, we'll put him aside and try again. Let's try this wizard. This wizard was really god-awful ugly to begin with. Hopefully he'll be a little easier to come clean. And since you're using a toothbrush on this, don't be afraid to go fairly hard on it. It's not like a wire brush. You're not going to take off any detail or parts or anything. And you're going to need to scrub fairly hard to get into some of that detail. Really wanted to get that crap paint job off his face. That was horrible. I'm really kind of embarrassed by this figure. It's hard to believe that my miniature painting has won awards when you see shit figures like this in my collection. You can also use a little bit of dishwashing detergent on it too if you can. Well, this stuff's kind of useless. You can also use Gojo, which is engine block cleaner actually, but it does its job. Get a little bit on your brush there. All the little folds and whatnot of his robes are making this really difficult. Alright, so he's not pristine, but I can zoom in a little bit and show you how much better this guy looks. You can actually make out the sculpture of his face and whatnot, and a lot of that paint is gone. And he's looking quite a bit better. Now, I'm expecting a few of these, like the roper here, the whatever this thing is, and the rust monster, to go by quite a bit better because they were painted with early acrylics. And like polyester paints was one of the first acrylic paints available to me as a miniature painter. And so I'm fully expecting these guys to go by clean up quite a bit better. Although again, that kind of depends on the color. For some reason those on the red and green spectrum tend to be a little bit more difficult. The age of them also has a lot to do with it. Older miniatures tend to, you know, if they were painted way back in the day and they've been encased in that horrible paint for 30 plus years, it takes a little more elbow grease to get them done, get them clean. That one seems to be coming along pretty well. Okay. Alright. Again, not pristine, but much improved. Let's try this roper. I'm expecting to come clean pretty easily because he was already kind of on his way to being stripped off. And brown is not generally a color that hangs on real tight. You can see he's foaming up pretty well here. Oh yeah, there we go. Look at that. Just a couple of seconds with the scrub brush and he's brand new. He looks like he just came out of the packaging. Scrubber. Now for these, if you find after soaking them in pine oil for metal miniatures, you want to soak them for about a week. This is actually came out to a little bit less than a week because I happen to have a day off, and so I decided to use that to finish up this video. The longer you soak them, the better. With metal miniatures, you can soak them forever. I've had miniatures in the pine oil for 6 months, and it didn't damage them at all. In fact, it made them pretty easy to clean off. But there you go. There's another practically brand new one. But some of these wizards, like this guy, I'm not expecting this guy to really come all that clean because the enamel paints tend to take a little longer to clean off in the pine oil. I might be surprised, I don't know, but in the event that it doesn't come clean, you can always soak them again in white spirits. You can try simple green. I've heard good things about a solvent called Purple Power, which is an engine block cleaner. You can probably find it at O'Reilly's or Advanced Auto Parts. There's a lot of different methods on the market for stripping minis. Yeah, see, this guy's not coming as clean because he's got the brown enamel on him, and that stuff is just nasty. So I may put this guy into a sonic cleaner full of simple green, or actually I'm probably gonna take this guy and the other wizard and the beholder there, and he came kind of clean. but he's still got a lot of that enamel hanging on there. So I'm going to take these guys and probably soak them in the white spirits for about a week, and then rinse them off and scrub them and see if that makes a difference. But that's about it for these guys. A couple of them came off really clean. Some of them, you can see in the beholder that most of the paint came off really nicely. The red is still being kind of stubborn, so he's going back in for the white spirits dip. And we're going to do that the same way we did the pine oil. So I'm not going to have that on camera. I'm not going to show you cleaning that up and all that kind of thing. I think you get the idea. So that's really all there is to stripping your miniatures. When you're stripping things like plastic miniatures, let me move that up a little bit. When you're stripping plastic miniatures, you want to use something made for stripping plastic. Pine oil might work. I haven't tried stripping it with on plastic miniatures yet. You probably don't want to leave it in as long because it is kind of caustic. Same with simple green. The engine block cleaner, the Purple Power, I've heard will just eat plastic. If it's left in too long, it'll eat resin right off the bat, so don't use it for those. There's a lot of information online about different methods you could use to clean up your miniatures. This is what I use because I found this works. It works really well for all these old metal miniatures that I had from back in the day, and I'm trying to strip them and repaint them now to bring them kind of in line with my current painting abilities. But so yeah, there's a couple different methods available. Go check it out and see what works best for you, what works best for your figures. If you have any questions about whether or not a product can be used to strip your miniatures or whether it'll eat the miniatures, take a little bit of sprue, just cut off a piece of sprue that you got from with your miniatures, paint it with whatever it was used to paint before, give it a couple days, and then try to strip that off. That'll tell you whether or not it'll remove the paint. It'll tell you whether or not it'll eat the plastic or the resin. It'll tell you how difficult it's going to be, how much longer you're going to want to let it sit, and all this kind of thing. Experiment with a piece of sprue, and that'll keep you from damaging any of your actual figures while you're trying to figure out how to clean it off and repaint it. Okay? So that's all I got for this time. Thanks for joining me for another week, and I will see you guys next week. Bye. Hey Brush Monkeys, Tom from Flying Monkey Studios here. If you like what you see, click like. If you want to find out when new videos get posted, click subscribe. Comment below on what you want to see on future videos. Visit our Patreon site for lots of ways that you can support me in doing what I do. You can also visit our Instagram and Facebook pages to see all the miniatures that I paint on this channel, and see how you can get your hands on one of your own. So thanks a lot for your time, and thanks for watching my videos, and I will see you guys later. Bye.